No, James, you can't have him, she said, nodding towards the door of the flat that the cat was sitting outside. He can't have just wandered in here and settled on this spot. He must belong to whoever lives there, probably waiting for them to come home and let him in. Reluctantly, I agreed with her. I couldn't just pick up a cat and take him home with me, even if all the signs pointed to the fact that it was homeless. I'd barely moved into this place myself and was still trying to sort out my flat. What if it did belong to the person living in that flat? They weren't going to take too kindly to someone carrying off their pet, were they? Besides, the last thing I needed right now was the extra responsibility of a cat. I was a failed musician and recovering drug addict, living a hand-to-mouth existence in sheltered accommodation. Taking responsibility for myself was hard enough. The following morning, Friday, I headed downstairs to find the Ginger Tom still sitting there. It was as if he hadn't shifted from the same spot in the past 12 hours or so. Once again, I dropped down on one knee and stroked him. Once again, it was obvious that he loved it. He was purring away, appreciating the attention he was getting. He hadn't learned to trust me 100% yet, but I could tell he thought I was okay. In the daylight, I could see that he was a gorgeous creature. He had a really striking face with amazingly piercing green eyes, although, looking closer, I could tell that he must have been in a fight or an accident, because there were scratches on his face and legs. As I'd guessed the previous evening, his coat was in very poor condition. It was very thin and wiry in places, with at least half a dozen bald patches where you could see the skin. I was now feeling genuinely concerned about him, but again I told myself that I had more than enough to worry about getting myself straightened out. So, more than a little reluctantly, I headed off to catch the bus from Tottenham to central London and Covent Garden, where I was going to once more try and earn a few quid busking. By the time I got back that night, it was pretty late, almost 10 o'clock. I immediately headed for the corridor where I'd seen the Ginger Tom, but there was no sign of him. Part of me was disappointed. I'd taken a bit of a shine to him. But mostly, I felt relieved. I assumed he must have been let in by his owner when they'd got back from wherever it was they'd been. My heart sank a bit when I went down again the next day and saw him back in the same position again. By now, he was slightly more vulnerable and dishevelled than before. He looked cold and hungry, and he was shaking a little. "Still here, then?" I said, stroking him. "Not looking so good today." I decided that this had gone on for long enough, so I knocked on the door of the flat. I felt I had to say something. If this was their pet, it was no way to treat him. He needed something to eat and drink, and maybe even some medical attention. A guy appeared at the door. He was unshaven, wearing a t-shirt and a pair of tracksuit bottoms, and looked like he'd been sleeping even though it was the middle of the afternoon. "Sorry to bother you, mate. Is this your cat?" I asked him. For a second, he looked at me as if I was slightly mad. "What cat?" he said, before looking down and seeing the Ginger Tom curled up in a ball on the doormat. "Oh, no," he said, with a disinterested shrug. "Nothing to do with me, mate." "He's been there for days," I said, again drawing a blank look. "Has he? Must have smelled cooking or something. Well, as I say, nothing to do with me." He then slammed the door shut. I made up my mind immediately. "OK, mate, you are coming with me," I said, digging into my rucksack for the box of biscuits I carried specifically to give treats to the cats and dogs that regularly approached me when I was busking. I rattled it at him, and he was immediately up on all fours following me. I could see he was a bit uneasy on his feet and was carrying one of his back legs in an awkward manner, so we took our time climbing the 5 flights of stairs. A few minutes later, we were safely ensconced in my flat. My flat was threadbare, it's fair to say. Apart from the telly, all I had in there was a second-hand sofa bed, a mattress in the corner of the small bedroom, and in the kitchen area, a half-working refrigerator, a microwave, a kettle and a toaster. There was no cooker. The only other things in the flat were my books, videos and knickknacks.